I'd like to go ahead and, if everyone's ready, let's go ahead and get our Whatcom PUD regular meeting of June 8th started. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would someone like to volunteer to recite the pledge?
I'll do it.
Great, please go ahead.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Christine. The first thing on our agenda is to approve the agenda, and I believe there's a desire to put a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, I was the one that suggested this to Steve, just because it's hard sometimes for people to come to a 2-hour meeting if we have a long meeting. So just an opportunity if people want to do public comment at the beginning and the end.
But on our agenda, it says item number 4 is public comments. Are we going to still do that 3? Or are we going to just do a beginning and an end public comment?
What this would do, Commissioner, would, if you approve this agenda, you'll have an opportunity for public comment at number 4 and also again at number 9.
Yeah, I support that too. Do we need to do that as a motion, John, or?
You can just.
You should move to amend. If you want agenda amended, it should be a motion.
So yeah, I'll entertain a motion to change our standard agenda to include a public comment period from going forward after the consent agenda, and then maintain a public comment just before we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, I guess I can make the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as it appears here.
And I'll second.
Great. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 The motion carries. So let's move on to our first public comment. Anne, could you assist?
Right now, I don't have anybody.
Just give it a minute.
Looks
Okay.
like, oh, wait, it looks like Rick has his hand up. Rick Miracle?
You just, right. Rick, go ahead, please.
Just a question about the Zoom meetings. I was wondering if there is a way that during the meeting, the general public can also see who from the general public is also attending the meeting, which of course is something that's obvious when done in person, but you can't tell who's there. So it would be nice to know who else is listening in, if that can be done. I don't know if it can be done or not.
I'm not sure. We'll have to look into that.
Thank you.
Is Mike there? I'm not sure. If I know when you pull down the participants tab or click on the participants tab, I see a column of participants and a column of attendees. So I can click on the attendees and see who's attending, and I'm not sure if that's available to attendees.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've just been an attendee, so I honestly don't remember if that those options appear as well when you're just an attendee. We're panelists, so that's why we get to see everything. So I think, let me see here. I'm looking at the attendees. Right now,
Well-
Aaron, if Aaron Peterson's listening, if he could raise his hand, and then Ann, if you could unmute him, he could let you know what that looks like.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, I cannot see other attendees. The other thing just to point out is that the way that these meetings are scheduled, we could also allow anonymous access, though. Even if you could see a list of people, that would be a very small subset probably, or potential subset of people. And those are the people that have chosen to identify themselves. But people obviously have the ability to listen in and access it with a fake name or a profile that wouldn't necessarily be identifiable to a person.
So I can check the webinar settings to see if there's a way to kind of force the attendees view for being visible. I'm not sure that is an option though, if that makes sense.
And just,
Thank you.
that'd be great, Mike, but I would say that we can't require someone to sign in and attend or give their name. I mean, we can obviously, you have to join, so they have to join, sign in that fashion, but they could
Yep.
use, Fred Funk as a name, and they could use, a number as a name, and don't have to identify themselves or give a name or address to attend.
Yeah, and there may be, I'll have to check like a previous video, like say I'll watch last week's or the last commission meeting on our on the website. We can click the link and watch it. I'll look on there to see if the attendees tab is visible or if it's still only the panelist view, because that could be a workaround, is if it's on the recorded video showing both the tabs, then I don't think it is, but that could be a workaround. Otherwise, yeah, the attendees view would be invisible.
Just also it might be helpful, Rick, to note that our minutes do indicate the attendees that Ann is able to identify. I think so far, mostly the attendees do identify themselves. I'm sure there's exceptions to that, but I don't know if that's helpful. Thanks for raising the question.
It is helpful, but it is delayed considerably.
Mhm.
Well, we'll see what we can find out on that and definitely let you know, Rick, what our IT staff can find.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
And certainly, certainly the richness of comments would be more if we knew that Robin was on when you're making comments, then you guys would be we would both up your game in terms of your comments. So that would. Sorry.
Particularly if you're discussing reserves.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, as always, for your comments.
I do have one more comment.
Please.
When somebody asks to speak, then they go on to view, so the attendees are able to see. So just keep that in mind, that maybe the people who aren't speaking, who are quote unquote just the audience members, aren't visible. But if anybody asks to speak and then Ann elevates them to allow them to speak, then they show up on the panel as a panelist. Then we're able to see that individual, if that makes sense.
Great. Is there any other public comment?
No.
Thank you, Ann. So let's move on to old business. We have two items under old business, the update on the general manager appointment process. And number two is the broadband program. So John, would you like to take the ball on the general manager appointment process update?
Well, I think we have everybody under contract, and key thing right now is that Jim Darling has started to engage and schedule meetings with staff and commissioners, and those discussions have begun, and that's what I have for an update. The substance of any outcomes, I think it's premature to get to that. He's doing his background information gathering and communications with staff and scheduling those meetings with commissioners.
Commissioners, do you have comments or thoughts on this subject?
My only thought is just that wanting to make sure that we get the July 6th special meeting on the calendar and solidified. I know we didn't want to do, since it's a sort of quick update of our 2025 strategic plan, we're not going to do a big in-depth engagement process, but I would like to make sure I let people know about the July 6th special meeting, since my understanding is that's when we'll be really digging into some of Jim's outcomes and having our first discussion as a commission about that. So I just think it's important that we get that on the calendar so that community members can block it out if they'd like to attend.
I'll follow up with Jim this morning and make sure we're getting that set and coordinate that through Steve as well.
I think,
Okay.
I think you could take action right this morning, Commissioner Desmani, and call for that special meeting on July 6th at 8 o'clock. That'll get
Thank
it
you
on
for
the
that
calendar.
suggestion. Thank you, Steve, for that suggestion. So do we just need a motion then?
You can take that action yourself. You can,
Okay, yeah. So I think we discussed it in our last meeting, but just I'll officially state that I'm requesting a special meeting for the 6th of July for the purpose of discussing our strategic plan update and further definition of the roles and responsibilities and scope of the new general manager position.
Set at 8 a.m.
That's an excellent point, Mike. Yeah, let's go with the standard time of 8 a.m.
Second.
Actually, I don't think we need a motion, a second, or a vote. I can just do that.
right, yes.
Thank you, Mike, though. Are there any, I guess I should ask that. So it sounds like Mike and Christine, you're on board with that. So
The only thought that I had is if we might get more participation, if we had the meeting at a different time. 8 a.m. right after a national holiday weekend might not get the maximum amount of participation, but then again, you never know. I think it's
Yeah.
really hard to know when people are more likely to join. So
Commissioner Murphy,
Is it possible to have a meeting, because it's in July, of all us gathering together? Doesn't have to be at the PUD, just somewhere where we could spread out, but it sure be nice to meet together with Jim and some staff. And in the past, only 2 to 4 maybe public ever show up. I have no idea what would happen this time, but it would really be nice to get together in July.
I agree.
We're going to discuss that later in the agenda about what the governor's allowing for attendance in persons and the complications that have given your space and the possibility of people attendance and if they're not vaccinated and the required social distancing. So I guess I'll preview that. Yes, you could have an in-person meeting. If you're vaccinated, you do not have to social distance or wear a mask, but you have to provide space in the facility for people who want to attend that are not vaccinated to socially distance. And you have to provide an overflow area as well for them to attend and watch remotely. And you have to provide remote participation still. So, we'd have to do some planning as to where an overflow facility might be if you had a number of people attend the special meeting.
And overflow space needs to be indoors. We can't have the meeting outside.
I don't believe that's prohibited, but weather might be a complicating factor.
Yes, yeah.
However, I'm all for a good walk where the commissioners and others can just walk along and talk.
But you have to provide the virtual opportunity at this point still. So if it was outside or walking, we would have to have some people with a camera following you. And
That's okay, John. You're taking me too serious. I was just trying to kid.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry,
I
it's
was
too early
imagining-
for me. Too early
I
for
was
me.
I was imagining a special cruise.
There you go. That might be easier.
I suppose you could have a second boat for overflow.
Okay.
Well, I too would love to be able to gather in person, but it sounds like we might need to give staff a little bit of time to figure out if it's possible and how we might configure that. So maybe location to be determined, and then I'm curious about what you two think about timing and whether having it later in the day, or I don't know if timing would increase engagement.
Well, I initially said at 8, but I'm open to a later time. There's another factor, if it's a particularly hot day,
True.
Yeah. So I'm open to maybe what if we move it back an hour? Does anybody at staff or commissioners have an issue starting at 9 instead of 8?
9 works for me, and that might also be nice if we have it in person to help with the tech setup time and everything.
Oh, I'll just say that, by the end of this month, we may have new rules. We don't know if they'll be effective before the July 4th weekend, the Independence Day. But, if we're hitting the vaccination levels, we expect some rules to change and allow more flexibility for meetings. But it's, again, back like last year, we don't know what's going to happen in 3 weeks on some of these requirements. So July 6th may be in the same place we are now in terms of needing overflow capacity and the rest, and we can work with staff on planning that. We may be able to do full in person. And right now, Jim Darling is planned on doing this all by Zoom.
Right.
So he may not be there in person regardless. We'd have to work through that.
So does anyone have an issue with me changing the time of the start of the meeting to 9 a.m. from 8 a.m.?
O'Toole,
Yes, Commissioner Murray.
I really don't have it doesn't matter to me, it's 8 or 9. However, I'm not sure why we would change it to 9, because my past experience is an hour difference doesn't really make a difference to a lot of people, but 2 hours or 3 hours might fit into their schedule. Say somebody has to take their children to school, 9 o'clock would be a poor time to be trying to attend our meeting or something like that. So I have found that later meetings, if you're going to postpone, works better in general for the most people, or you start at your 8 o'clock. So, but I'm good with 8, I'm good with 9, I'm good with 10, I'm good with 1, whatever you want.
I think 1 would be late because, we want to keep everybody, it is our most important topic. I'd like to be 100% fresh.
Yeah.
So you're going to change it to 9?
Yeah, if you have no issue, I'd like to change it to 9. Give people a little bit more time.
Yep. You give me more time to drink my cup of coffee in the morning, so thank you.
Great. All right, Steve, we got that?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
And if it's at 9 o'clock, we're gonna have to, and if it's gonna be in person, we're gonna have to provide coffee for everybody.
Wait, yeah, we have lots of money in the coffee budget, obviously. We could check with Annette, but we could really go to town on the amount of coffee we produce. Moving ahead, there's no further on the general manager appointment process update. Any other comments? I have my appointment with Jim Darling this Thursday, or this Wednesday from 2 to 4. And I'm looking forward to that. I scheduled 2 hours. I'm wondering what the other commissioners decided to do as far as the amount of time you budgeted to spend with him.
I'm meeting with him on Thursday. We have an hour and a half on the calendar right now, but he said it might go longer than that. So
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any idea what I would Yeah, but I assume 2 hours would be a good idea just to make sure we cover everything that need to be discussed. So, thank you. Commissioner Murphy?
I'm already have my meeting scheduled just before yours, all cool on Wednesday. I believe it's for 2 hours.
Oh, okay. So, okay, it wasn't just me. All right, great. Just was checking about that. I didn't know if I was asking for too much time. So, all right, great. Well, let's move on to 5B, the broadband program development update.
I'll take that first, Commissioner. I've had continued discussion with the Port of Bellingham staff on the interlocal agreement. Have yet to receive a response from the port on our draft interlocal agreement with them. We did have a discussion yesterday with Gina Stark. She said that she has had little time to have a discussion with Rob Fix the executive director at the port about the interlocal, but she expects to have a response back to us by the end of this week. So I'm looking forward to that. This morning, in the last week or so, I've had a couple of discussions with Debbie All at the Mount Baker Foundation, she is with us this morning and would like to provide a brief presentation about some ideas that the Mount Baker Foundation is looking at to support in terms of providing funding and working with NOAANET to do some work in the county, and also some ideas on how to utilize both, I shouldn't say both, but PUD staff, City of Bellingham staff, possibly Lummi staff, and the port staff to provide some leadership and work with Debbie and the Mount Baker Foundation and NOAANET on this work. So, and I think I see Claire Ward is with us also this morning, and so I know that Debbie has had extensive discussion with Claire and NOAANET about this work. So, with your okay, I just turn it over to Debbie.
Great, thank you. Is Debbie on?
Yes, she is. She's muted. Debbie, you're muted. There you go.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much. Good morning, commissioners and Steve and John. It's so nice to see you all. And Claire, thanks for joining us as well. So I thought I'd start a little bit. I know that you all know a little bit about Mount Baker Foundation, but for the purpose of other people listening, let me just give a real brief overview. So Mount Baker Foundation, we're a relatively new foundation, been around for about 3 years. And our funding comes from the legacy of Mount Baker Kidney Center. I'm sorry, do you hear my little person in the background? I have a young office colleague in the house this morning. So the focus areas of Mount Baker Foundation are really three. One is that legacy, which is chronic kidney disease, how to improve this, how to perhaps even eliminate the need for dialysis in the future. And so we will always have a heart there for that particular legacy. The other is on children and families and really trying to improve generations of health year over year. And the final is a committee called Equity and Health Determinants. And Scott Wallace, I think, is on the call with us here today. He's the chairman of that committee. And that committee really took a look at, especially as COVID really got rolling, it's clearly what we saw is that, yes, we're all facing the same storm, but we are not all in the same boat. And there's some people in some pretty leaky boats out there that did not have access to the internet, and schooling and isolation and everything else just made this a real particular focus and issue for Mount Baker Foundation. So the board has of Mount Baker Foundation, and one of the reasons I think Steve has asked me to talk today is that the board wants to clearly support and has actually approved some funding that we can use as it is appropriate, as the port and the PUD feel like it works well, that we can serve as somewhat of a catalyst to get things moving. They've given me two things in terms of that funding requirements. They said this needs to be based on a collaboration between the port and the PUD, and I'm seeing that happening, and I'm so excited about that. And the second is don't let this be one more study that sits on a shelf. So it has to be very much action-oriented, forward motion with, you know, as I look, my background's actually 40 years in healthcare. And I always think about all those diagnostic tests, for example. If you're going to do them, do you want to participate in the treatment that those plans would actually create? So I always look at what's going to happen after that study, what's going to happen next. And then I also, so really from the board's perspective, you know, they would like, you know, I'll be, they've asked me to really make sure, what can we do to make sure this moves forward? And so I basically took a look at things, and from my many years in my silver hair of working, there's a few things that I've learned. You know, one is that when people are working so incredibly hard, and everybody is, and I see the commitment and everything else, you kind of have to pull back. You have to pull back, and sometimes an outside set of eyes is helpful. And pull back and look at what's the end game, what's our goal? And the goal is to get internet, you know, to everybody throughout Whatcom County. And I've also learned over the years that you skate to where the puck is going to be. And that's an old Wayne Gretzky comment from the NHL that I've always loved. And, you know, he scored 200 points for each of 4 seasons and probably knew what he was doing. So skating to where that puck's going to be. So it may not be the 25-3 that we're looking at for broadband. It may be the 100 symmetrical at a minimum. And then I also learned, how can you look at what are your deployable resources? You know, what do we have? Because we have limited staff, really, who are very busy doing so many things. Is there other deployable resources? And that's where I've been engaged in talking with Claire and understanding what NOAANet has done, and also the resources that they contract with, to see how we might pull this together. And also the resources in the community, resources such as TAG Northwest. And you have so many citizen groups out there that are so committed and working hard and meeting all the time. How do we move this forward? And a lot of that is a very focused plan, and B, a really strong communication strategy. So my thoughts, and I do this with great humbleness, is suggesting perhaps a path forward. And I've had conversations with each of our commissioners here, which is very, very much appreciated, with Steve, with the Port of Bellingham. I've had with Ken Bell and Michael Shepard. I have not had the opportunity to meet Bobby Briscoe, but look forward to that. And certainly with Gina, who I've been working with over this last year or so on Connect Whatcom, and with Rob Fix. And so I'm hoping that I've done well in terms of looking at everybody's at different perspectives and understanding. So are you able to see my screen share now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so if you will, and again, I say this is with humbleness that I'm presenting perhaps what might be a path forward. And Connect Whatcom is a concept that I shared with Gina, and we used some time ago with, you know, trying to look at how to involve the different school districts and businesses and everything else. So it's just, I think, a great name to kind of say that's what, it's very clear what we're looking for. So the very positive things that I see happening is you've already got an interlocal agreement under review and looking at moving that forward. There's a newly formed or almost formed task force between the PUD and the port, and I know that there's still probably action that needs to be taken by the PUD here in terms of either authorizing that or appointing a commissioner. But I think that that's a great opportunity, and my understanding that would involve one commissioner from each side, one staff person from each side, and the general manager from each side. And then this evolving NOAANet proposal, and the proposals that I think that still will be refined and tweaked, and there's still, I think that we really want to look at very clear deliverables, and as the proposal, even though it's, you know, starting out in terms of a little bit more survey in that, it's where are we going from there? And Mount Baker's Foundation's role, we're simply a funder. Certainly members of our board have much more technical experience than I do. I have none. So if I use the wrong words, also forgive me for that. But as a path forward, I would share these thoughts for that, that collaborative task force and for the PUD, and perhaps I know there may be people from the port here, if this makes sense. And so the first step is really, you know, to confirm what are the shared understandings, what are we going for? And A, internet service that's affordable is a basic need. 2021, it already is. So we need to be there now, and really looking at a minimum of 100 megabytes per second symmetrically, and service plans that are $50 a month or less. Affordability is as much an issue for internet connectivity as is that actual connection. And the third element we would say is the connection, it's affordability, and it's also digital literacy. So those are programs that we also need to look at too, and some thoughts as to how the community might really participate in that. Next is fiber optic cable as a critical infrastructure. There's a lot of other opportunities and alternatives out there, but it's basically a critical infrastructure that can serve us well. But even while that's the infrastructure, there's interim solutions such as fixed wireless that could offer some last mile solutions down the road. And this is just a bit of, thanks. This is something that we want to balance as we look at partnering with people who might, or organizations that might offer fixed wireless, but will want a return on their investment in terms of setting things up. I think that we would all agree the commercial ISPs, we're a capital economy. They have every right to compete, but not everywhere. They may not have really looked at how to serve those underserved marketplaces. And so some combination of public infrastructure and private solutions can benefit our communities that are underserved or unserved completely. And the next step I would really say is the overall plan and strategy. And this isn't different from a lot of what's already been going on. And so I definitely want to recognize and commend the work that's already been done. And to say that anything going forward would start with the work that's already been done. So there's already been to aggregate all the existing data for a comprehensive map of internet speed, perhaps load, testing capacities, but you already have the port study. Gina Stark's right on top of this stuff, working on this GPS map that she has. Mount Baker Foundation actually has funded some data collection out in the county that may be valuable, a lot of information from the school districts that have participated, and the city's fiber map, that's all there. So how do we look at what's a true picture of what our county looks like? And then supplement that data, mapping that out, having, we're looking at NOAANet as deployable resources, aggregating all of that, mapping that out, and looking at the strategy for how to serve these. The Port of Bellingham is clearly on top of this, making great progress in terms of the rural broadband project. So overlaying that map of that rural broadband and also the timeline for when it's going to happen. So if out to Glacier is going to happen by the end of 2022 and perhaps down towards Acme in that, if that's all happening and that's good, so we know that we can count on that. But then what about the other areas that won't be touched perhaps until 2023 or even 2024? Because we all know also that things happen and funding is always an issue. So as we look at that, are there markets that won't be served on that kind of a timely basis? And can we identify those interim solutions that can also serve as that last mile when the public infrastructure is already built? So then it's really the engagement and funding process. So I've been fascinated by meetings with the local utility district. There's like a loops group that's looking at how do they get internet into their neighborhoods, and the options of local utility districts that can be supported by the PUD, and with interesting, funding, innovative funding mechanisms so that it's not a huge burden for the individual residents. How can we take that concept and template it out through parts of the county and look for ways of getting internet access for that, even the, what's the phrase? Fiber to the house. So that type of thing. And then funding's everything. I mean, funding is everything. We're not going to do anything without money, and Mount Baker Foundation is not in a position to provide millions in terms of building infrastructure. We're here for some catalytic funds in terms of saying, how do we leverage funds to get those funds? So how do we focus on doing that? And again, the port has been doing all of this, but it's also more and more funds are going to be coming. It's complex, it's difficult. NOAANet actually has an individual inside that works on state funding, and they have a contract with an organization that does federal funding applications, across the country. So how to focus on that? Again, deployable resources. And then the communication strategy, I think, is so critical to always listen and learn from, and to make sure people are kept apprised from everyone to all these community citizen groups. These are great people dedicated and focused on the heart of getting internet to people. Tag Northwest, I think, is an organization that continues to evolve and may serve a great function, has a great board of directors involving the education facilities, that involves business, that involves technical experts. And it's just a great opportunity to work with them as well. And business. I mean, if business needs internet connectivity, as do the local governments, and making sure that their citizens are all cared for. And the ISPs. This continual, constant, consistent, transparent communication that has been going on, but that will continue to need increasing levels of intensity, I think, as we go forward. And finally, implementation, building the infrastructure, as the funding, as it can be confirmed, getting that infrastructure in place, that whole backbone, and then implementing those localized, somewhat interim, perhaps, sometimes there will be long-term and the last mile solutions that for areas that can't be served by the port developed fiber on a really timely basis. And the option that's now available through the PUD to provide a public plan option where the ISPs are not willing to move into and offer affordable plans. So that whole public-private combination. I think as this new task force gets started, it's really important to define roles and to be really clear, who's doing what. I mean, everybody will need to collaborate on the strategy, the final mapping, the identification of solutions. The Port of Bellingham is clearly the builder, the contractor of the fiber optic infrastructure. The PUD has so much to offer, and I've seen each of these commissioners so engaged and concerned about the needs of the community and really looking to make sure that happens. So there's tons for the PUD in terms of both leadership and providing that last mile support, perhaps the financing of the local utility districts, possible retail solutions. We all still have a lot to learn, and a lot of new territory has just opened up, but I see a very committed band of commissioners wanting to get this done. And roles of NOAANET. If you choose to go forward with NOAANET, and that's an area where we can fund that initial engagement, aggregating that data map, providing the project management, identifying the network design. And in my mind, network design is Whatcom County. I keep picturing this map. So what are the solutions in different places? And really helping to support those focused funding efforts. And who are we? We offer private funding, and we simply want to serve the community and really to support that initial area. And in some ways, we're a deployable resource, but in terms of funding. And sometimes private funding is easier than governmental funding. We recognize that as well. So the next steps, this PUD Port Task Force, as you move this forward, I suggested weekly. That may be far too much, but it could be just a 15-minute call. I'm used to stand-up calls. I'm used to what's actually happening. It's just a check-in. So literally, where do we stand on the action plan? And there's an interlocal agreement that needs to be obviously fully reviewed and signed. It appears that that's predominantly kind of a financial document, but it also speaks to intent, the intent of the port and the PUD to work together. And Clara suggested that the first meeting actually be in person if we can, and really taking a look at confirming that vision that's there, that we know that's there, but also being very specific in terms of what we're looking at and what the tasks are and how we're going to go about it and what's going to happen. This is not just one more survey that we're going to look at and review and pull off our shelves, but how do we get forward? And after we do that, though, then we would finalize the agreement with NOAANET. And if that's an agreement directly with Mount Baker Foundation, if it's just funding, we can look at that, but clearly specific deliverables. And then launching the work plan and making sure that we're communicating across the board. And I think NOAANET has a good reputation for that communication and for really assisting us with that process. So I'll be quiet actually and see if Claire might like to add anything to that.
Well, Debbie, you did a fantastic job. Thank you so much for presenting. Yes, everything Debbie said, NOAANET would be really happy and grateful to be a part of this project. I've, already said this to Steve and to Debbie and to Gina. It's really an interesting situation up here where there's so many public and private partners who are ready and engaged to work together toward a common problem. So yeah, if you do choose to move forward with NoANet, we would be really excited and looking forward to working with you on taking this plan and making it a reality.
Commissioners, comments, thoughts, questions?
Well, I'll jump in. So just first of all, thank you, Debbie. As you were presenting, I just was feeling so grateful that we have organizations like the Mount Baker Foundation and leaders like you that can help, bring us all together. And I think it's the value of these public-private nonprofit partnerships just really came through to me as you were speaking. And so thank you for sort of being that third party that's maybe a little less emotionally involved in all of this and able to kind of listen to all the different things that are going on and bring it together. Because as you said, I think all of us commissioners here are deeply involved in different ways, but it can sometimes be hard to bring all of that together. So just wanted to start by saying how appreciative I am of that. And that, and I'll speak to this a little bit more too, but in the, I was on the EDI meeting last week related to those EDI funds and had a conversation with Executive Sidhu afterwards. And I think some of his feedback on the work, the broadband work, which he's also very invested in, is just the need for all of us to collaborate. And I think that when we do have a lot of partners, like you said, Claire, it can be harder at first, but I think we get huge dividends later on when we have strong partnerships. I was very involved in the federal stimulus funds in 2009 on an energy project. And it was, we got a $20 million grant with leverage. It was almost a $40 million project. It's one thing getting the funds, implementing them is a whole nother ballgame. It's really hard to spend $40 million or what, it's hard to spend money, and we need to really bring everybody's strengths together. And so I think that's really important. So, I mean, I think that the path forward that you've laid out so far is, I'm ready to go, really. I think that, one of the things that I like too about NoANet is that they do have such a strong build background. And as you said, Debbie, with that really focus on action oriented, we don't want to just spend money on more plans. We want to get fiber in the ground. And we know that that's going to take a while just because of all the supply chain issues and things like that. But I like that NoANet is focused on building, and that's their history, because that's when we actually help people. So I'd say that those are kind of my high level feelings or reactions to the presentation right now. And of course, there's some details to figure out, but that's where I'm at. So would love to hear from the other commissioners too.
Thank you. I had the privilege of spending some time with Debbie about Mount Baker Foundation. And for one thing, Debbie, you're an incredible person. So thank you. I wanted to meet Scott, but Scott was not able to join us. But after talking and listening to Debbie about Mount Baker Foundation, I think everyone that's involved with Mount Baker Foundation, this board, are incredible people, because they're there ready to serve the community, especially what they're doing already. And now they want to venture out in supporting this broadband. So thank you very much. And Debbie, if you pass on to the board, we really appreciate this. But a couple things in your presentation, I would rather move a little quicker. I'd rather, listening to Claire's presentation and knowing about NoANet, I'm ready to sign my name to a piece of paper right now. Let's get going today, if not tomorrow, with having NoANet start working for us. I still keep requesting that the commissioners from the port and the PUD get together, because I'm not aware, personally not aware of what those three commissioners are thinking, nor their staff. And, you know, I realize that this is not the only hat or the only job Gina has, Stark, at the port. She does a lot of other things, as well as we're trying to hire somebody to be our broadband manager, which seems to be very difficult to find. But can we work with others? Can we work with the Mount Baker Foundation? Of course. Can we work with NOAANet? Of course. And as people like yourselves come forward, it gives me hope that we'll be able to accomplish this. When the PUDs sit around and the three of us talk about something, it's really hard to know what the community is really thinking. Now we have Mount Baker Foundation, and we know the port's interested, and we know that there's others' interest too. We have to build this so-called chain of all of us coming together, linking together to say, what can we do and what we can't do? And right now, I feel like we're just kind of grasping at straws. I want to bring us together and I want to see it. I think the port and the commissioners need to meet immediately, as well as get NOAANet going, while the PUD continues to look for a manager to do the broadband. I can see that role, that person is going to be very, very important for the success of this. So thank you everyone for all you're doing. You know, let's get going. I'm ready.
Thank you, Commissioner Murphy. I'm in agreement with what both Commissioner Grant and Commissioner Murphy said, and really have no other words to offer. So, how do we get on with it?
I was muted, but I was gonna just say something. So you know, and Debbie, you don't have your PowerPoint pulled up anymore, but you know, Steve and I talked a bit about that, the port PUD, are we calling it task force, or where we were gonna appoint someone from the PUD to a commissioner from the PUD and a staff person from the PUD to collaborate with the port. And I like that. And I was thinking, oh, I can volunteer to be that person, but I would love to have Commissioner Deshmani and Commissioner Murphy there too. I mean, I think it's hard to get everyone in the same room, but the benefit of us all getting together is that we have all of our brains and all of our experience there, because Atul's talking to people that I'm not talking to. Mike's talking to people that we're all having, and we bring really unique perspectives. And I think that I agree with you, Mike, that I think we would benefit from having a meeting with the port where all 6 commissioners get together to maybe finalize the, you know, I want to make sure we facilitate it in a way where it's really productive and we're not delaying the process anymore. But you know, that's one. I see what you're saying, Mike, too, about wanting to get on the same page with those commissioners. And perhaps that's something that NOAANet could help us with. I think, has that been something that you talked about doing, Claire, or I don't know if Debbie or Claire want to jump in on that.
Yes, we'd be happy to help facilitate that conversation if you think that are valuable. You guys getting feedback from me?
And that may be something that we do with that kind of initial meeting is, you know, as long as we notice things, you know, public notice and everything is maybe there could be a couple opportunities actually in terms of, you know, launch and everything else that it'd be great to have the commissioners together. And I recognize that I recognize and value all the purpose of you know, open meetings and that it is so important to be able to do that. So you just notice them and and make sure that you follow the rules. And it's nice to have some legitimate heart-to-heart conversation.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to be a part of that vision sort of setting meeting and come up with actionable items and next steps and make sure that everyone's on the same page all at the same time, and then we can get to work.
Great.
Just a thought, Commissioner, just a thought about that joint meeting is, I think that it would be, I think that having someone like Claire, help facilitate the discussion, I think that would be a great approach, but I do think that the request for that meeting should really come from, one of our commissioners to the Port Commission, at a government to government, I think to request a meeting, but then having someone like Claire facilitate the discussion, I think would be a great approach.
I'd be happy to request it, Steve.
I think that, and yeah, I think that we should, I think requesting it now is probably fine. I do think we should really make sure we spend time before getting crystal clear about the agenda and what questions we want to ask and what success would look like from that meeting, because we'll have a lot of people in the room and we don't want to waste anyone's time. And so again, that's where having a strong facilitator would be really important, and probably a third party, so that it's not, because we are trying to kind of hash out who's playing what role. So just making a plug for having just some really strong questions or goals that are guiding that meeting. But Atul, if you want to go ahead and request the meeting, I think that would make sense. Are we looking at taking any motions or action right now based on this conversation, or what's?
Yeah, request is just a request, and I believe Michael Shepard at the port has made a similar request too.
Yeah.
So we're having it initiated from both ends, so I think that's sufficient direction to staff to make it so. Commissioner Murphy?
Yeah, Atul. So, the port to me is very important in this, but to tell you the truth, so are all the other cities, the tribes are important to me too. I'd love to see a letter coming from everyone with their support, even if they're not going to support it. I'd at least like to know why, But on the other hand is, why can't we start working with Mount Baker, the PUD, start working with Mount Baker Foundation and NOAANET and start this moving forward? It seems like, and everyone have to chime in, we possibly could have the funds to go ahead with NOAANET. Is that true?
Well, yeah, it's in our budget too. Mount Baker Foundation's expressing support, and it's in our budget too. So
we can take action ourselves as the PUD, as the commissioner board, and start pushing this forward and making, so by the time we meet with others, we may even have more information if Claire leads it and if she wishes to lead it. I don't like to tell someone to do something like that because that's a big job. But if we could have that in place already, I think it would just move us along. I don't want to just sit there and ask them, how do you feel about things, the port? I want some kind of action at the end of our meeting with the 6 commissioners, staff, and everyone saying, yes, we agree, and here's what we're going to do. I understand the interlocal agreements probably being discussed between attorneys, theirs and ours. So once they work that out, I'm sure then we can sign it. That's probably what we're waiting for more than anything.
thank you, Commissioner Murphy. I think Debbie has a comment. I think Steve has a comment after that.
I would just like to, Mike, I appreciate it. And I love your inspiration to action. That is very important. I think that the collaboration between the port and the PUD is very important, and that, if Mount Baker Foundation is funding this, we really want to see that being, my board gave me specific direction, collaboration, and make sure that there's an action plan going forward if we're to fund this. So I would really encourage that perhaps this commission, and I don't know exactly how you do things, but you could perhaps do some kind of a resolution or whatever to support that forward path and to support the work of this task force that the port has recommended establishing, and then also encouraging all the commissioners' attendance at some of those meetings so that we have that full sense of the heart, as I would think, moving forward. But I really think the next step is let's get this meeting together of this Port PUD collaboration effort. Let's get that together and let's define the strategy, because that's what's really going to inform the agreement with NOAANET. And if it's Mount Baker Foundation funding or signing that engagement, we're going to want to make sure that that's truly collaborative.
Steve,
I love your action.
Thank you, Debbie. Steve.
Just a couple of thoughts, and that is, I would, unless hearing all the comments from Commissioner Murphy and Commissioner Grant, and in support of what Debbie is proposing, I would suggest that you may just simply pass a motion that indicates support for the concept that Debbie has now laid out. The next step would be then whether or not, that staff, my staff, myself, and probably Brian, sit down with Claire and sort of dig down into the details as to how the work would be completed based upon what the Mount Baker Foundation and Debbie is proposing. And then that we meet with Rob Fix and Gina Stark at the port and talk about where the interlocal agreement is at, and then discuss in detail, what work that Claire and NOAANET would do, and then try to move forward quickly with getting that joint meeting with the two commissioners, or two commissions, I mean.
Steve? Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh, well, okay.
Commissioner, I think Commissioner Murphy was first.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I'm willing to step back and let you go first, Christine. It's up to you.
It's okay. I wrote down what I was thinking. It'll come back.
Good person. Otherwise, I'll lose my thoughts. Altua, you brought it up. And Steve, do we actually have the funds in our budget right now? If we would move forward with NOAANET, that we could get started, knowing that once this local agreement is put together with the port, that Mount Baker Foundation will join in with us, even supporting. Can we start now? I don't want to wait another 2 weeks or wait until July or whatever to get started with the port. I have no idea when they're going to approve on their side, because they're busy too, when we're going to meet. And I don't want to waste 2 or 3 or 4 weeks or whatever. Steve?
We have, Commissioner, we have a budget, a line item budget in our 2021 budget for, we called it, we just identified it as broadband study. We did not, at the time we put the dollars in the budget, we did not have any detail around what that would look like. We just, the commission's commitment to start that work, that's what helped us identify a dollar amount in the budget. Since then, of course, we've gotten 2 proposals from Claire and NOAANET to do a 2-part, I'll call it a 2-phase work project, and we've also reviewed a proposal that NOAANET provided to the city of Bellingham to do similar work, but then once Debbie and Mount Baker Foundation stepped in and started speaking about doing what we had asked NOAANET to bring us a proposal to do for us, which was really going to be focusing on identifying a couple of pilot areas in the county to do that work. But now with the work that, the scope of work, I'll call it, that Debbie and the foundation are proposing, it's going to be county-wide. So the numbers look different, and we don't know what those numbers are if NOAANET would do this on a county-wide basis. Long response, Commissioner, we have money in the budget to do a certain amount of work. The proposal that NOAANET provided to us to do is, to start out with a couple of pilot areas, that amount in the proposal was higher than what we had in our 2021 budget. So we have money, but, and Commissioner Deshmani and I talked about this very briefly yesterday, is yes, we can commit funds to the work, but we really don't know at this point what that work would look like and what that budget would look like if we do it on a county-wide basis. I'm assuming it's going to be higher than what we have in our budget. And so my comment to Commissioner Deshmani yesterday about this was, let's take a look at what the budget would look like, you know, for NOAANET to do this work under the, you know, the concept that Debbie is proposing on a countywide basis. And if we need to supplement the funding coming from the Mount Baker Foundation, that we identify, oh, if we can do that much more, then let's add, you know, some of the funds from our budget. But the other question that I would have is, at this point, I'm fully supportive, you know, what you're saying, Commissioner Murphy, is that let's get started, you know, let's not wait. But then we need to make a determination of whether or not that contract with NOAANET is going to be with the PUD. And I don't know that that's been determined yet, so.
Well, that was actually leads to my question that I had, which was for you, Debbie. And that was, I mean, is the Mount Baker Foundation comfortable moving forward with a contract with NOAANET soon? And you having the initial contract be between the foundation and NOAANET, and as we get our roles and responsibilities defined more, then we can layer on that additional funding with NOAANET to help us further define what each organization should be doing, what funds we should be applying for, et cetera.
So I would be very comfortable if the commissioners here this morning basically pass some kind of a motion to support this approach going forward and to support the PUD port task force moving forward. I would be very comfortable in continuing my conversations with the port, with the commissioners, with Rob, with Gina, as well as with Claire, and hammering out what this all will look like. And I can tell you, I'm able and willing to move very quickly. Mike, I think I could satisfy what your Commissioner Murphy, I think I could satisfy your desire for action. So if that's something that you're willing, and we could just start moving ahead, and we can figure out who's the signature on the contract right when we are ready to sign. But I can tell you that the board and the impetus of the Equity and Health Determinants Committee that Scott Wallace is chairing, that he's on the call today, I can tell you that he would just look at me and say, get it done.
I have a question, and I don't know, Altul or Christine, Debbie, or Claire, Steve. Mount Baker Foundation being a private organization, I would rather you work with, Debbie, you pick both of the port and the PUD, or with the PUD and moving forward with NOAANET, but allow the PUD, is my desire, to be in control of the funds of it. So I'm requesting that Mount Baker Foundation put the funds towards the PUD. And now John may have to step into this for clarification. A private organization funds something, I believe they own that information. It's not going to be for the public. It could be pulled back. I'd rather it to go through the PUD so that it is very clear that any information, any forward steps moving forward means it's a public move. Otherwise, the information is there for the public. So I'd rather take the PUD, take the lead, supported by Mount Baker Foundation. Your thoughts?
Yeah, could maybe John also speak to that, please?
Well, it all depends upon the agreements and the parties to the agreement. I mean, you could have a tri-party agreement that the PUD in the Mount Baker Foundation and NOAANET commit to certain information to be provided to the public and in a public forum, and that it becomes a public record, and as well as any data and things like that. If it's ownership of intellectual property, that might become a separate issue depending upon the nature of the contract. But it all depends upon who are parties to the agreement and then what's the nature of the agreement.
And I can assure you that anything that we did, we'd be happy to put in the engagement with NOAA that is public information available. Certainly the port and PUD, but frankly, it's just public information. We have no interest in doing this and sitting on the information. We only, the board made it clear, look to where we're going to go. So it's public information.
And Debbie, the time that you and I spoke, I know that about you, and I know that as you speak for the board, the board is that type of a group of people. So, but I really do want the PUD as well as the port to take the lead in every aspect of this. I support everybody coming along with us. But I just think that the PUD needs to take the lead in actually contracting with NOAA. And but if everyone disagrees with that and says let Mount Baker Foundation take the lead, I just want to move forward. But
I think it also could be, Commissioner Murphy, I think it could be through the interlocal agreement, which really defines the financial thing. It could be that the port and the PUD sign the agreement with NOAA, and Mount Baker Foundation is simply the funders. And I think that would work fine. We really would like it to be a PUD port collaboration. Absolutely agree with the public information, and we can simply be a funder and not a signer on the agreement. I think all that is great, but really we'd like to see that port and PUD collaboration.
Thank you.
Chief.
Just a thought is that if Mount Baker Foundation offers the funding based upon the scope of work that is developed using that new committee, whatever we're calling it, between the port and the PUD, the one that Michael Shepard brought forward, and that committee acts as a steering committee to work with NOAA, develop the final scope of work, and then acts as a steering committee or as whatever we want to call it, a management team to implement the NOAA network, and that the Mount Baker Foundation's funding is contingent upon the two parties acting collaboratively in that fashion. I would suggest that if the agreement between NOAA and either the port or the PUD is the way forward, I believe based upon the kind of numbers that I expect that we're going to be seeing to do this work, we'd have to go through a formal RFP process, and that's just going to slow things down. So, I mean, based upon, some of the comments that Debbie made earlier, that, it's the offer for funding is really contingent upon the collaborative work between the port and the PUD. Okay, then put that offer out there and say the funding is going to be there only if this, this joint committee works with NOAA, develops the final scope of work. That can be done quickly, and then acts as a steering committee, and that the contract between or with NOAA is going to still be with the Mount Baker Foundation, but that would be one of my thoughts.
From a practical perspective, I think what Steve you're proposing makes a lot of sense. What are the thoughts of the other commissioners?
I'm ready to make a motion today that the PUD authorizes the general manager to sit down with Claire and NOAA and draft something up so that the commissioners can sign and move forward by the next meeting.
Motion
Yep.
isn't necessary for that. I think Steve can take that direction from the collective discussion.
Great.
Unless you want the the force or political effect of the motion.
Steve, what do you feel?
Or unless Steve wants my backside covered with a motion.
Well, you're
that
you're a
too.
short timer. You don't have to worry about that anymore. But anyway,
Oh, thank you very much.
no,
No,
absolutely, yeah. If you'd like a motion, let's go ahead and do that then. And I think it's what was suggested earlier, John, which was not necessarily about the agreement, but the motion about that the commission is in support of the proposal by a presentation by Debbie All, which is now in the public record, and to act accordingly to formalize agreements. Is that fine, John?
I think let me just try this. It's direct the general manager to commence negotiations of an agreement for with the Mount Baker Foundation for an agreement for funding with NOAANet with the port and the PUD. And let
That
the
sounds
general
great.
manager take that forward.
Mike, would you like to make that motion?
I do want to make sure that Debbie, representing the Mount Baker Foundation, and Claire NOAANet agree to this, because Debbie, I don't want to throw you on, or your organization, under any bus by committing you to something. Are you okay with we make a motion to say that the general manager of the PUD is authorized by the commissioners to move forward in meeting with Claire and NOAANet? Or would you rather still wait for a local agreement to be signed first?
Mike, I think that's fine in terms of moving forward. I think it just will be very important to continue conversations also with the port. And again, that's a collaborative effort. But so what you're recommending today in terms of the motion, that's not an issue. But I think that just the understanding that we'll want to make sure that the port commissioners are also involved in this and feel comfortable.
And as I outlined the motion, that included the port.
Altu and Christine, both of you have talked to staff and commissioners at the port. Do you feel we have their support if we move forward on this? Because again, I don't want to make a motion like this and then all of a sudden find out they don't support it, because that'd be terrible. So what's your thoughts? Do we have their back? I mean, do they have our back? And can we make this motion, or are you thinking we should? I want to do what is right. My action is let's go, but I don't know if that's in the best interest of everybody.
Should I start, Atul?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, so I have not talked to Commissioner Briscoe, but I have had conversations with both Michael Shepard and Ken Bell. And I think both of them would agree that the partnership with the PUD is important. The port isn't a utility. We're a utility, you know, there's, I think that none of us have a crystal ball and we're all trying to make the best decisions about how to maximize services for our community going forward. And I think what I've heard again and again is that we just need to have really clear division in terms of who's doing what. So we're not stepping on each other's toes. So we're not doing rework or doing the same work. And that's, I think, where some of these distinctions about, okay, maybe the port does the backbone and we focus on retail and last mile, or setting up the local utility district or fiber hoods model like we've seen with the local loops groups talking about. We just really, I think the thing that I'm hearing again and again is really being crystal clear about whose role is, who's doing what, so we're not stepping on each other's toes, but that there is a role for all of us. You know, the PUD already owns and maintains fiber for our internal operations. That's a big skill set that we could bring to the table in terms of continuing to operate the system. So I think we all bring unique things. And this is why the process going forward would be so important. And I think there's also clear consensus that having a partnership and a collaboration like Whatcom Connect, especially if we bring on more partners, is going to make us more attractive for both public and private funders. And that's what we're going to want to be looking for right now. And I think having more partners helps. Like if we did ever go down the route of really launching like a public ISP, which I'm not saying, you know, that this is just something that I've talked about with a few people. We want a lot of partners. We want a lot of buy-in from all the different public agencies so that we're really on our game with marketing and with using these existing channels that we reach people. And so that's a long-winded way of saying I did feel like I got a lot of positive support from both of those commissioners. The devil's in the details.
And I have had just to Steve, just to clarify, I've had also meetings with Ken Bell and Michael Shepard and Gina Stark and with Rob Fix too. And in those meetings, I've also gotten the same reflection that Christine stated. I think the board is somewhat emphatic about their desire to be focused more on the backbone and asking the PUD to be more focused on the delivery to the homes and businesses, which is something we as a commission haven't exactly embraced, but certainly open to discussing that that kind of division of responsibilities. LUDs can be part of that, and other instruments can be part of that. And I think that the interlocal agreement is also something that will, figure out the division of roles and responsibilities too. Steve?
I think you're all speaking to the same thing, and that is that I was not here at the PUD 20 years ago when we engaged in broadband and fiber optics, but one of the model that Tom Anderson tried to build in the community at that time was this broad coalition of public entities with a one single vision in mind that Debbie spoke to earlier. And he, for whatever reason, was not able to build that coalition. There was a lot of communication, a lot of meetings. I participated as representing the small cities at the time, but there was simply not a willingness on behalf of any of the other public agencies to quote partner and create this leadership. And I think that's that's the key right now. And that is getting the port and the PUD willing to take the leadership jointly in developing the program. And if we don't get that formalized partnership, willingness to lead, so that everybody in the community can say, can ask who's doing this, that it's the coalition, it may be Connect Whatcom, but it's the PUD and the port, that's who's behind this. If we don't get that, we're not going to be successful this time either. And I think that's the key to we need to build that firm commitment on behalf of both parties. And if we aren't able to do that, then I think that then the decision has to come back to you, the commission, to say, are we willing to be that lead? But I think that no matter whether we work with NOAANET or we work with anybody else, that's what we have to get in place. And we haven't been able to accomplish that in the last couple of years. So I think this gives us the opportunity, I'll say it, to really to push both commissions to make that commitment and get moving.
I have a few thoughts after this from discussion. First is that we still need to pass a motion. And we all we've all talked about how we want to get the ball rolling, but I think I do think we should pass some kind of a motion for what we're asking as far as the next steps. And I think that motion should include something about finalizing agreements to satisfy the intent of Debbie All's presentation and proposal from Mount Baker Foundation. Secondly, I want to clarify that there are many things that have to be fleshed out in the proposal, but the one thing we do want to get started with is the contract for beginning the study work. And then there's a third point, and it's escaping me. I'll have to come back to it. But I would like to proceed with us passing a motion of some kind to indicate support. Now, John has proposed some language regarding that. We've had more discussions since then. So what say you, commissioners, about this? Any suggestion on language? And John, if you want to have any more input on language.
Yeah, I mean, John, and jump in here, but I mean, the motion was roughly along the lines of directing the general manager to begin a contract negotiation. I mean, it would be with the Mount Baker Foundation initially, right? Is that what we said?
Yes, whoops. I gotta hit the right buttons here. It would be with the Mount Baker Foundation, but would also likely be with Noah Net and the port.
Okay.
So it would be to engage in the contract discussions with Mount Baker Foundation for funding projects of Noah Net with the port as outlined in Debbie Hall's presentation.
Okay, I can take a
Not
run
into
at
the details of what the scope might be.
Mike.
Christine, before you say the motion.
Yeah.
I want to make sure, one thing I've learned over the years, and we talk about the words connecting Whatcom. To me,
Yeah.
connecting Whatcom right now is each of us come together, and if you wouldn't mind me saying, holding hands to link us together first, hopefully we'll go to connecting Whatcom County with fiber. I want to make sure that our words are correct. And right now I hear it being said that we are going to work with Mount Baker Foundation when the port and the PUD sign a contract, because my whole goal about moving today is to allow Claire to take action, or Steve to take action, to Claire to get to working. So, because I have no idea when the port and the PUD is going to sign this interlocal agreement. I have no idea when we're going to get together. It could be the end of July and we're still sitting here talking about it. I would like to, by June the 22nd, have something come before the commissioners saying, here's what we accomplished, here's the agreement, and we're moving on. But Debbie said that her board will not move on till that interlocal agreement is signed between the port and Bellingham. I don't know when that's going to happen. We could be 6 weeks or 8 weeks away from that. I don't know.
Debbie, did you have something to say in that response?
I was just going to say that I would be happy to commit to being able to develop something to bring before the commission by your next meeting. Very committed to moving forward.
Well, yeah,
and then that will be. I'll
keep going.
I'd love to just help you guys move forward.
So I mean, I think
that John's language of the motion was great. I think that gives us everything we need to do. That you could, if you were willing to pass that, I'm very comfortable in moving forward with that.
And I think that the motion is general enough, Mike, that what might happen, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, it's possible that we will get a contract with NOAANet to help us facilitate the specifics of the interlocal agreement that we then have with the port. So it's, so that we can get Claire under contract to begin helping us under the assumption that both the port and the PUD want to collaborate, but we need to work through a lot more details. We don't want to have to work through all those details before we have a contract with NOAANET. We need NOAANET to help us. So that I think that the motion that, you know, it's just, we're directing Steve to begin working with the Mount Baker Foundation, NOAANET, and the port so that we can move forward as quickly as possible. And then maybe one of the deliverables of the contract with NOAANET is the finalized interlocal agreement. Or sort of like a modified interlocal agreement. The interlocal agreement is probably going to have to be updated several times as we know more about how we're working together.
I hear what
sense?
So
Yes, it
let me just clarify something. That the interlocal agreement that is pending before that's been presented to the port is a very high level general planning an agreement. It's to set. It really is nothing more. It's not a financial commitment. It's not a here's projects to be done. It is there's a very high level planning structure document. Commissioner Grant is absolutely correct that when any ideas or action items are identified through that interlocal or through the subsequent interlocal with Mount Baker Foundation and NOAANET, there would likely be subsequent supplemental interlocals to implement actual projects collaboratively with the port. So there are a series of steps. While that planning interlocal is working through the port, it's worthwhile to use the time, as Mike is expressing, Commissioner Murphy's expressing, to get on with the getting on, is to start discussing and laying out the framework and the agreement that might exist between NOAANET, Mount Baker Foundation, the PUD, and possibly the port as well, because that's going to take some time to pull together. I hope that helps frame where we're at and what's.
It does, John. Thank you for that.
Should I attempt to make a motion? Or Steve, did you want to say one more thing?
I have a question for John. John, if, and I'm not suggesting that this is the step forward, but if the PUD would consider entering into the agreement with NOAANET in order to get this work moving, recognizing that we will push forward with the interlocal agreement with the port and work with port staff on this, the definition of the scope of work with NOAANET. But if we would consider entering into an agreement directly with NOAANET, contingent upon, of course, the funding coming from either, our own budget and the Mount Baker Foundation, would we have to go out for an RFP? Or
Not involving, this is, I believe, is a personal service contract from what I'm seeing at this point. It's not engineering, it's not architectural, and it's certainly not a public work. You're just doing some planning, and it can be treated as a personal service contract from what I'm seeing in the roles that were identified in the PowerPoint.
Well, here's my thought then, that the commission direct me to do two things. One, to work with Claire to define the scope of work that, based upon her understanding of what the Mount Baker Foundation is willing to fund. And we develop that scope of work, get a budget, and then bring that back to you.
On the 22nd.
Yes. And at the same time, and the other part of that motion would be to continue to direct me to work with the port in developing that interlocal agreement and help define, the role of this quote committee that Michael Shepard has brought forward. And then we will, at the same time, we'll, work with the port in trying to establish a joint commission meeting. But I don't think that short of that action, I don't think that we're going to be able to bring anything back to you on the 22nd that would help move this forward. I think that if we simply leave it at us working with the port staff in trying to develop this work, I just don't think that's gonna happen before the 22nd. So that's my thought, is that let's, let me work with Claire and then of course with Debbie, define that final scope of work, that budget, and hopefully we can bring that first action back to you on the 22nd.
Okay, so just to repeat back what you said, since someone's gonna have to make a motion here, my understanding is that, so what you suggested, Steve, is make a motion to direct the general manager to work with Debbie All of the Mount Baker Foundation and Claire Ward of NOAANET to develop a scope of work and budget for joint broadband program development with the PUD and the port for our review on the June 22nd commission meeting.
Yes, and assuming that if that works, if we were able to get that back to you on the 22nd, that we would actually sign the agreement between the PUD and NOAANET, contingent, of course, upon funding from Mount Baker Foundation. That would not be a agreement between the port, the PUD, and NOAANET. I think that's the quickest and the most reasonable way to move forward with making sure that we get started on this.
Mhm.
Well, I'm okay with that as long as Debbie's okay with that, but I think this would just give you all an opportunity to have a follow-up conversation after this meeting and sort out some of these details. Does that, is everyone okay with that, including you, Debbie?
I'm fine with that. And I think because of the fact that you have this interlocal agreement that'll also be signed, I would suspect that the port would be fine with that as well. And I'll just continue to include them in the conversations. I think that's a great motion and be great to move forward with that.
Okay, so, and then you also thought so should we just move forward with that one? And then Steve, you also thought we could make a motion directing you to keep working on the port interlocal agreement. So, but should we start with the first one that I just said? Do you want me to try to say it again? Okay. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to direct the general manager to work with Claire Ward of NOAANET and Debbie All of Mount Baker Foundation to develop a scope of work and budget for joint broadband program development in Whatcom County with the port and the PUD.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it. I'm a little confused though, Christine and all too, about the role of NOAANET, because I'm not sure exactly how the motion read according to what they will provide us with mapping and other things, or.
Well, we're directing Steve to work out the scope of work and budget with NOAANET so that that's part of what they're going to figure out between now and June 22nd.
Okay, yes, I'm good with the second. Yep.
There's a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? So all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Now, on the subject of broadband, I have two other items I'd like to introduce when Commissioner Grant, would you like to address?
Well, Steve indicated that maybe he'd like a second motion too about directing him to try to finalize the interlocal agreement. So I just
Let's proceed with that. Please go ahead.
I wrote it down. So, okay. So I'd like to make a motion to direct the general manager to work with port staff and commissioners with the port to finalize the draft interlocal agreement and define the broadband committee roles. I don't know if it's called a committee or a task force, but something along those lines.
Second that.
Is there further discussion? Okay, well, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 And that motion carries. There are two items that I'd like to address on this subject on our agenda, 5B. And the first is county collaboration. I've gotten a request from the county executive for the purpose of having a regular update conversation on progress in broadband and fiber. To me, I just want to inform the commission of that. I will begin attending a meeting with the county executive and reporting out to the general manager by email. We have a weekly interaction, and then at the commission meetings, it'll be in my commissioner comments.
That's great. I just want to say thank you for doing that, Commissioner Deshmani. I, also had a conversation with the executive last week and felt that he just is very supportive of our work on broadband and wants to be a resource to us. And so I'm really glad that you have scheduled that time for regular check-ins with him, and look forward to getting the updates from you. Thank you.
Thank you. The part of the thinking here is that 2019, we were able to convince city council to make at Bellingham a priority of broadband, which is a significant step forward from where they were in 2018. And I see an opportunity to create that same level of galvanized support in the county council. Of course, talking with the county executive is also important, but county engagement period at both the council and at the executive is something that is an opportunity. In terms of physical infrastructure, the county has the least physical infrastructure related to fiber. But that doesn't mean they don't have tremendous opportunity. The largest single opportunity is in all the road work the county does.
Right.
They're most important towards the implementation of dig once practices. Even more important than the city. So that is something that I will attempt to address. I think there's some misinformation about the potential of wireless, particularly in the long term. And I think having studied fiber and its climate-related footprint, for example, fiber is listed as the #1 priority in the state, Washington state energy strategy, which many people found very surprising. But the energy footprint of fiber is an order of magnitude less than wireless. Perhaps 2 orders of magnitude less, depending on how you do the math. I've got scholarly research that ranges, but it's always at least an order of magnitude different in terms of energy footprint. And these are all things we have to deal with because the county is about to receive a report from the Climate Impact Advisory Committee, which will also address fiber. So anyway, for all these reasons, it's really important to get the county, as Steve, thank you for bringing up the importance of community-wide engagement. I think we can all work, all of us, staff and commissioners, particularly commissioners, to reach out to our colleagues in the county to let them know we want this is barn building. Our fiber network is like a big barn we're all building together. And we need to listen to each other, work together, and then hopefully throw many parties to recognize accomplishments as they start happening. So that for that reason, I wanted to bring that up, and I promised to report back to the commission on that. The second item I wanted to just Okay,
Can I ask a quick question, Atul? Could you, maybe when you talk to the executive, I'd just be interested if there is any, if there's staff resources that could look into a dig once policy at the county level? And if there could be, if we could somehow get that on an agenda item for the county council going, just maybe even just to educate them initially. I'm happy to have conversations and I know enough about dig once to give the 30,000 foot overview. But I think that that would be a great opportunity to educate, to somehow get the county council educated about what a dig once policy is. So
Yeah,
just maybe something to bring up to him.
Right, and specifically, the issue is whenever when the first presentation of the idea of dig once comes up, everybody says it's a great idea, but then why doesn't it happen? Why is it so rare to happen? And the reason is because there's resource impacts to dig once. And so what are the barriers to dig once is a presentation that I would like to see given to the county council, and how do we implement it, recognizing that anything that sounds like a good idea at front, it doesn't happen. Well, maybe there's more to it. And so really understanding what's that more to it and how to overcome those obstacles. So, Steve, did you want to talk about county stuff?
Yeah, just I think that your comments and ongoing discussion about dig one is underrated, if you would, by most people in the community, because I think that most people, when they hear about that concept, it's all about if you're going to dig a trench, put everything in once, don't. But it's more than that. And when talk about the county, it's more than just public works and road building and trenches and so forth. The county has a responsibility to look at not just wireless service in terms of in terms of broadband, but public safety, communication. And I know the city of Bellingham and the county are now working on some joint discussion about radio communication along with WTA, especially out in the east side of the county. So the county has for years have staff looking at telecommunication, wireless, radio communication, public safety. But I think that hopefully if we move forward with some kind of a coalition, coalition in the county working on broadband, that it will create an opportunity to have those same discussions about integration of communication, across the county. So anyway.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Just remember that the organization that we're likely to be working with, knowing that, is the Northwest Open Access Network. And so that's the other thing that's really important to bring up regarding countywide collaboration. Just the public is uniquely positioned to do two things, and that is dig once and open access. Mm-hmm. And the private sector, the telcos don't build roads. Last I checked, for the most part, they don't. Maybe Google's going to start. I don't know. But the thing is that that's what the public sector does, and so it makes a lot of sense to leverage that public works resource to take the cost of installing fiber down by an order of magnitude. And it's important to keep repeating that point. It's an order of magnitude less expensive when it's integrated with an existing dig project. And then open access, which is really providing a level playing field. Not the level playing field for, as some might suggest, some kind of government monopoly, but a level playing field so that all can participate. So it's really important to recognize that open access is creating a tremendous, wherever open access exists in our country, it's creating tremendous competition and opportunity for the private sector. And that's really the real benefit of economic benefit, the economic development opportunity is open access. So obviously, with the participants we have here in this meeting and who are involved in these discussions, community-wide, open access is a given, but it's important to repeat that again, that we need to see that reflected over and over again. The second thing is that I'd like to raise is the subject of collaboration with the port. I wholeheartedly would love a multi-commissioner, public meeting which involves all three commissioners from the port and the PUD. I don't want to hold up progress on the subject waiting for public meetings though. So with regard to that, I'd be very comfortable designating one of us commissioners as the primary contact for PUD staff and the port for port PUD collaboration. And I'd like to suggest that Christine, you take that role. If Commissioner Murphy is comfortable with that as well.
Can you explain a little more, O'Toole? And Christine, what do you think you would do? Because we're at a place where it's nice to have a contact as a commissioner to maybe another commissioner, but it's really getting down to the point where we're going to have to start meeting with them and us and really start working out I hopefully we're not asking one commissioner to speak on behalf of the whole board, are we?
No, not all, Commissioner Murphy. I was just worried that if there's a meeting that needs to happen to plan our public meeting, that who's the designee, and I'd be very comfortable with suggesting that Commissioner Grant be the person that Steve worked with in planning that public meeting as far as for the commission.
I
just
support
thought
that.
it's not uncommon for an agency to have a designated legislative official be the liaison to another body, a legislative body. That person can't bind the legislative body, a council or commission, but just as say a city has a representative to WTA or you have a representative to the COG, this would be no different.
Well, and I think that was the concept that Michael Shepard brought forward, was that you could have that, I'll call it a working committee with one of the three commissioners, because we can't have two commissioners or all three without having a public meeting. But there can be a great amount of work that can be done in between quote public meetings in helping each of the commissions prepare for those joint meetings. And I think that that kind of a committee with that kind of representation gives support to staff, so that staff is comfortable that a quote, commissioner is involved in that, and that commissioner has accountability to the full commission to make sure that communication is clear, and at the same time that staff's not making any kind of commitment without full commission approval. So
I would be happy to play that role.
Good. Thank you. Because I was going to say, Christine, if you're interested in it, and O'Toole, I'm all for it. I think it's a good move. Yes.
Great. Are there other topics under broadband for us to discuss?
I have one more thing that's brought, I could bring it up in the commissioner report, but we're talking about broadband right now. So I participated again in the a monthly meeting that the Fiber Broadband Association does. I think that's with elected officials around the country. So I think we're representing 28 different states now, and every month there's a different topic. And what we talked about a few days ago was all of this effort right now that's going into, the Treasury Department is putting in guidelines around the American Rescue Plan. And we obviously have a new acting director in the FCC. But there have been several different, it was basically a call to action for local leaders to make sure that we are communicating with our federal representatives, our members of Congress and senators about what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish and how different changes could help us. And I think that the general idea was don't sell yourself short in terms of the role that you could have, kind of spurring change among those, federally elected officials. And so, one discussion point was about the FCC's definition of high speed, and that we all agree that 25.3 is sort of laughable. And yet that's what it is. And that's how we define underserved. And so a group of bipartisan lawmakers, senators, I think, wrote a joint letter to the FCC recently, saying that the kind of base high speed definition of high speed should be 100 symmetrical rather than 25.3. And so, I'm not trying to make a motion right now, but I talked to George Kahn about this, and, he said it's perfectly appropriate, in his opinion, for a commission to write a letter to your delegation and to, just outline what we're trying to do and what changes at the federal level might help us. And it's not like we're going to get the definition of high-speed internet changed, immediately. But I think that, and the other thing George said is that they would be happy to help us write the letter and get it to the right people. They feel like that's what their role is. And so I would still need a little bit more time for some of this to percolate for me to really know what I would want to articulate in a letter. But I guess one thing I just want both of my fellow commissioners to be thinking about is that we are leaders in our community. We understand more about this than a lot of other people. And if the federal rules aren't working for us in terms of making sure that that grant money is getting to the right place, let's not be shy about speaking up about it. And I'm going to continue looking at what some of these other letters are, but essentially what we would be doing is we'd be writing a letter to our delegation saying, can you please talk to the Treasury about changing the rules for what is defined as underserved when these grant funds go out? Or can we just really begin an earnest conversation about having the FCC definition of high speed changed? And one of the things that was discussed in this group, and it was with some different people that are working on behalf of cities, is that quality goes a lot more than further than quantity. These members of Congress get tons of form letters. But when there's a really well thought out letter from, elected body like a PUD commission, it can actually really go a long way. And they think about it. They often have staff follow up with you. So again, I'm not ready to make a motion here, but I wanted to put that out there and say that I would really like to make sure that that's part of how we're operating going forward as we identify more of these possible barriers that we want to talk about. And for me, the speed issue, the definition of high speed, is a clear topic that we might want to think about. Oh, John.
Well, I think that's the kind of thing that is a good topic for the community group, be it the county, the port, the PUD on a planning level, in that the group could define a community standard of what it wants to see and expect when it develops something, essentially a community development standard, if you will. The tension is, when you start, I think the electeds are most effective when they're setting policy. And so adopting a community standard or expectation of what high speed internet is in the community and why it's needed, and the facts and the findings that support that policy, and seek to have that adopted by the county, port, PUD, cities, that would go a long way towards influencing not only the state legislature, but federal legislature, and then give some guidance for designs and specs when projects go out. And that, I think, was where that effort could be most effective.
Mm.
Not most, but very effective.
Okay.
So speaking to that as well, and I'll dovetail comments from the broadband advisory group meeting, which occurred between our last meeting and this meeting. The last meeting was actually relatively short, and the focus was on definitions that they had for the concept of quality, but really it was a conversation of quality, reliability, and durability. So it's not just enough to just talk about speed, I would argue, speed under load. So another way of looking at this is load testing. And the analogy would be, if I'm not going to buy a vehicle based on how well it does solely on wide open throttle from a stoplight. The federal government has a drive cycle that they suggest for example, EPA fuel economy numbers. And all of us want to drive a vehicle for more than just one event to decide whether it's acceptable performance. So there's a whole range of things that we're looking at, and that's real world conditions, real loads. So that's where quality, reliability, and durability all intersect under a real driving cycle. It also isn't even enough to talk about that. We have to recognize that we're on the early stages we're still in the relatively early stages of a revolution in data. So like the electricity grid and demand for electricity exploded. Like the first lines that were run were just to provide a light bulb or two. That's all you'd ever want. Why would you want more than that? Well, we all know how much electricity consumption grew. And it grew quite rapidly until it started to saturate. And now, of course, we're actually on a per capita basis consuming less energy. And that's quite likely to continue. But, we don't know when we're going to leave the exponential rate of growth phase for data. But there is a concept called Nielsen's law of internet bandwidth, which suggests that every year our demands for data are going up 50%. So even if we say 100 and 100, that may be a very insufficient hurdle. Imagine a hurdle jumper who has to continually get stronger and jump over successive hurdles. One thing that's really important to realize when you look at data and data compression and data delivery, fiber already has the capability of meeting what we would need to have in terms of rate of growth in 10 years. And the delivery of technology advancement for fiber is faster than the delivery of technology advancement for wireless. So another reason why it seems wise in terms of investment, wise use of public funds in particular, is because fiber is able to support the needs of our growing data needs more cost efficiently over the long term. And we've already talked about energy and carbon and attributes like that. And in a letter to our local representatives to our federal delegation, I think we also need to ask that when the federal government is going through something like this that's going on with stimulus, there's a lot of no strings attached culture, and that concerns me. And it wouldn't be, if it was in isolation, it would be just a theoretical concern. But we know what happened under President Obama and the release of funds through ARRA, ARRA, the first massive stimulus that happened over a decade ago. A huge portion of money that was intended for growth of our fiber network ended up being used for growing private monopoly cellular infrastructure. And we should require that when public our taxpayer dollars are used, they be used to deliver open access, particularly backbone. Now, the only exception would be is that if federal dollars are used specifically to serve fiber to the home, it's a little bit different because you're actually directly benefiting an end user. But when federal dollars are being used for backbone construction, they should be indexed to an assumption that they will be delivered under open access. And that is not necessarily happening. And I think that we should try to encourage that kind of behavior, because open access is what delivers the maximum economic benefit to our country and our communities. I have to say again, dig once. I'm not sure how that applies, but I'm just going to say dig once again. So, yeah. So the work of the city broadband advisory committee on definitions may really be helpful to the county, the port, and the PUD, and other municipalities, because this committee is going through the task of hashing out how do you define, what our goals are, and maybe the countywide, we may not have exactly the same answer as a consensus, but certainly the discussions that are happening are very fruitful in figuring out how to parse the different aspects of delivery of data service. So I look forward when those definitions get stabilized to well, I'll circulate those definitions. Any more on broadband?
Oh,
Debbie,
Does Debbie? Yeah.
you're on mute, Debbie. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I need to excuse myself, but I just wanted to thank you, all of the commissioners, for the work today and for allowing us to talk. So I'm here, and Mount Baker Foundation is here as a partner to you, and just wanted to say thank you. And if I could answer any questions before I go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Debbie. We'll keep our eye
You're
on where
welcome.
the
Good to
puck
see
is
you all.
going.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Bye now.
Bye.
Okay, well then let's move on in the agenda to new business.
Could I request a just very short break, Nicole, like 5 minutes or less even? Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. So it's 10:03. My iPad is showing me. So at 10:07, is that good?
That's
for everybody?
good for me.
Is-
Okay, thanks.
Great. We'll continue at 10:07. Thank you. Well, this is new thing, an announcement. I like it. Just waiting for Commissioner Murphy. Mike, are you there? Great. Are we ready to get started? Okay, let's resume our meeting of the Whatcom County PUD June 8th regular meeting. So what we have next on the agenda is new business. And under 6A is the interlocal agreement with Okanagan County PUD. Is that Brian?
Yes.
Yes, commissioners.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, we've been down this road before, so you should be fairly familiar with the process. But Okanagan PUD through Bonneville Power Administration has requested a transfer of $200,000 in from our EEI budget that we have remaining. The process would be that you would approve an interlocal agreement with Okanagan PUD, and that would facilitate the $200,000 transfer. This is an interesting one. Okanagan, as you're aware, being one of those Eastern Washington utilities up in the northeast corner of the state, or central portion of the state, has suffered over the last few years from wildfires. And it has not only impacted residents and commercial businesses, but the PUD's infrastructure as well. They lost several hundred poles, distribution transformers, capacitors, switches, everything that supports electric power supply delivery. And so in this request for budget, they're going to use a portion of those funds, the bigger portion of the funds, to purchase higher efficiency distribution transformers as they rebuild that part of their system that still isn't operable. And as the letter indicated that was attached to this action memo, they'll also use a portion for the local community action low-income programs, since those folks that lost homes or have the least means to implement energy efficiency measures would be assisted through this process. If this transfer of $200,000 is approved, we still have some remaining budget. We are anticipating there is one project that all is needed is to get the paperwork in, and we can get reimbursed for that project, approximately $30,000. And then we also have the option under the Bonneville EEI program to hold on to $50,000, up to $50,000 in budget, which we can roll into the next 2-year rate period. So we can handle both of those as well. So with that, staff is requesting approval of the interlocal agreement. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So there are no requests for funding that we foresee from any of our local municipalities, Blaine or Sumas, at the present time?
With that transfer approved earlier to Sumas, that satisfied their needs, as far as I know, for the remainder of this rate period, which ends in September. We reached out to Blaine earlier because we had heard through Bonneville that they may need up to $45,000 in EEI budget, but we never heard a response from them. I've talked to Bonneville since. Bonneville said they haven't pushed Bonneville to get any more money, so we could reach out again, but as of today, there's no indication that Blaine will request any additional funding for this rate period. It may be that they're waiting till the next 2-year period.
Commissioner Grant.
So I did reach out to a city council member up in Blaine, Eric Davidson, who reached out to me before to ask some questions about the PUD, and I let him know about our EEI allocation and the fact that our commission was really wanting to keep that spending local. And he was very interested, pretty unaware of the opportunity. And I know that Brian, you were in touch with staff, not with council.
Correct.
But I think that for me, kind of, and Steve and I have talked about this too, but I think that for me, it sort of underscores the fact that if we want to try to keep more of this spending local, it's going to involve more than just a quick email. Hey, do you want some EEI funds? It's going to, I think, involve more commissioner work, collaborating with other elected officials at, the city of Blaine and at the city of Sumas, so that they know about the programs, so that they can talk to their staff about building more robust energy efficiency programs. So I think that this is maybe something that we need to be more long-term and strategic about. If we know that we frequently have reserved EEI funds and we want Blaine and Sumas to absorb more of those funds, they need to begin preparing for them and kind of building out the efficiency programs that would help them use that money. So to me, if that is truly our goal, we need, I think, as a PUD, and again, like I said, I think this is something that commissioners could help with, but we need to be a little bit more strategic about how we're doing it.
Go ahead, Ron.
Well, I was just going to say, we have discussed in the past, although I've taken no formal actions or identified it as a strategic initiative, discussions with both Sumas and Blaine about forming some type of coalition, not only for energy efficiency fund applications, but also for broader discussion on power supply in the future. Broadband,
yes.
Transmission arrangements to get power to load, this type of thing. And I would suggest, you're revisiting your strategic plan. That might be an initiative that'd be worth pursuing. Because I think there are some opportunities there. In fact, when you think about it, if we had a coalition with Blaine and Sumas, in total, the customer base would start looking like a normal utility. You'd have residential, commercial, and industrial customers. So.
And we can't, I think that's a good comment, Brian. And we can't, by virtue of our powers vested to us by the state under Chapter 54, we cannot go into Blaine and Sumas and operate our own utility, but we can form a joint operating agency working with both of those communities because they have their own electric utility. And there may be opportunities to even share beyond resources, but in terms of energy supply, but even in terms of maintenance and operation and sharing staff on an emergency basis, those kind of things. I think it's something that we could certainly look to.
And there's already a couple organizations that we are members of. NRU, Power Services, such as a coalition of utilities, but they're focused on power supply only. And then PNGC is another organization out of Portland, Oregon that represents a broad array of primarily co-op utilities, but they do the same thing. They pool
Is there
their
any
efforts.
other, is there any other entity in the county that we could potentially transfer these benefits besides Blaine and Sumas?
No, it would have to be, if you're talking specifically of the EEI budget that we get from Bonneville, it has to be a utility entity that buys power from Bonneville. That's the model. So within those utility jurisdictions, obviously it's at the purview of that utility, how those funds are used in their communities. I mean, as long as it's energy efficiency and it reduces their electric load and their purchases from Bonneville, school districts can be involved, hospitals, whatever, as long as they're in that utility jurisdiction.
And no kind, electric vehicle charging infrastructure of any kind is not, some people would argue that electric vehicles are a form of efficiency. But can we do anything with EV charging?
Not at this time, not under the
Okay.
program rules. That would take a regional discussion and a change in policy of how those funds are distributed. But I agree with you, Commissioner. It's just like a behind the meter rooftop solar that reduces load,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't qualify.
Okay.
I just have one last comment about this item, and I probably should have brought it up in the two previous approvals of the sharing of EEI fund. Is that I think it would be appropriate, and I know Brian is in constant communication with Phillips 66 on potential projects, at Phillips 66, but by far the majority of these credits come from the power purchase by Phillips 66, and I think it would be appropriate to send I don't know if you want to call it a thank you, but just a recognition to Phillips 66, saying that we are able to share these funds locally as well as regionally because of your power purchase through us. I think that would be appropriate.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely.
The other thing I can bring to mind is there is discussions going forward on the post 2028 power contract with Bonneville. And obviously the Northwest Conservation Council plays a big part in Bonneville policies, that there's a policy discussion going on right now, how to treat energy efficiency going forward, that it's always been considered the least cost resource Now, based on the cost information coming in on some of the renewables, it may not be the highest in the resource stack. And there's a lot of back and forth on that. And so pay attention, because it will, in some manner, affect that energy efficiency budget we're allowed through our purchase of Bonneville Power.
Okay. Well, given all that discussion, and Brian, I appreciate the suggestion about maybe thinking in our strategic plan about how we form a stronger alliance with you know, our other, you know, Blaine and Sumas, or how we can be more strategic about keeping these funds local going forward. But given that, you know, the new rate period begins October 1st, I would be comfortable with approving this interlocal agreement, especially to help, you know, a fellow, you know, PUD recover from the devastation of the wildfires that that portion of Eastern Washington has suffered for many years in a row. So they really have gone through a lot, and if we can help them rebuild, that would be great. So if I'd be comfortable making a motion, unless we have more discussion. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the interlocal agreement with Okanagan County PUD and the transfer of $200,000 of the district's BPA EEI program budget, and authorize the general manager to sign the agreement.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? My dog doesn't agree, apparently. Brian? So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries. So the next item on the agenda is a rejection of bid for the refinery substation equipment purchase.
I believe Brian Alec was going to take this, but I don't see, he's on as an attendee. I don't see him on as a panelist. Oh, there we go. He's coming on.
Yeah, Alec will take this.
I'm gonna challenge Alec to explain this.
Am I on now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I don't see my picture, so I was not sure. So good morning. We are unfortunately at a place where we were about a month ago with this transformer purchase. If you recall, we rejected all the bids for this approximately a month ago due to the fact that all of our bids included conditions or exceptions. And unfortunately, all the bids included conditions or exceptions again. And so we have come to the conclusion that it makes the most sense for us to reject all these bids again based on that. And in order to purchase our transformers, we'll discuss that in the next action item. But for this, because these bidders all conditioned their bids,
Yeah, I might add on Alec's behalf is that amongst the bids that we rejected, two we could reject outright. They didn't include a bid bond, which by statute we have to. We can't accept that. And then others were putting in language that would allow them to escalate the price. In other words, they weren't firm bids. They were firm bids only that would only hold through the bid process. What we're facing is a market right now with a lot of uncertainty in terms of pricing of materials. And so these are large custom transformers. They require obviously a lot of copper and other materials in the innards of them. And it appears that the suppliers couldn't lock down their materials prices. And so they put in language that said, we'll hold to this price unless at the time we buy the materials, they're higher than when we made the bid. And we, under our competitive bid laws, we can't accept that. We need a firm price locked in. And they weren't able to provide that. So ultimately we had to reject all bids. And basically by rejecting all bids, we had no bids.
And let me say it a slightly different way. I mean, Brian's absolutely right, but you did not receive a responsive bid to your criteria. And that means you have no bid was received. So you only, since the bids were not responsive because of those escalating clauses that Brian spoke of that were not terms of your proposal bid requirements, there is no bid. There are no responsive bids. Thus, we can consider this a special market condition. As a result, we believe there aren't any case law on this, but given this unique circumstance where you've gone out for bid, received no responsive bids, you can treat this as a special market condition and go out and negotiate.
Is that what resolution 793 is about then, John?
Yes.
Well, I might add, a couple of years back, we went out to bid to purchase a shop crane, which is installed in our maintenance facility. In that case, we did not receive a single bid. And in researching RCW, we were allowed to go out on the market on that. And so we have made purchases under the same RCW. It's just in this case, it seems a little, we need to get a little stronger with it as the market conditions are pushing these contractors to escalate their costs. So.
But a lot of that, Alec, is not the fault of the contractor. It's could be manufacturing, it could be anything, because I've talked to a lot of contractors building homes right now, and they're telling me that they make bids on custom homes, and some of those homes now are $100,000 more than what they bid to the new owner, and the owner has to pick it up. Are we facing that same thing right now? Is that what's happening to us?
We're trying to avoid that.
But it may well be the case if you approve the two actions that are before you, that we will enter into negotiations with a supplier, and there might be an agreement to a cost escalator within a certain range if they can provide evidence that their costs went up. So that may be what we'll have to do to address this situation.
So I guess for this one, we're just asking to reject all of these, and there'll be more discussion with the next action item.
I'll make a motion that we reject all 7 bids that were submitted. And I guess that's all I have to say then.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So you're Alec, you're presenting on the second part as well?
I'm going to turn this one over to Brian.
And I will use John as backup on this one, but because of the situation we just discussed regarding the bids and rejecting all bids, or essentially receive no bids, we're asking for approval of this resolution number 793 to enable staff to go out and negotiate the purchase of the substation transformers that we need for the upcoming project. And we're hanging this, basically we've gone through the process twice. We received no responsive bids, essentially no bids both times. And there is special market conditions underway right now, given the recovery from the pandemic and the fact that the supply chains are goofed up and price uncertainty reigns in the industry right now. We need that ability to go directly out to negotiate the purchase. John, do you have anything to add to that?
No, we would agree. That's our view, that the lack of responsive bids, as I indicated, after two efforts, the special market conditions under 3904, 281B of the RCW allows you to waive the competitive bid requirements. You know, I would just add on, the problem with these escalator clauses is that you could have a second bidder, lowest bidder, say, I had an escalator, but it didn't go as high as the first, and you ended up paying more with what was a presumptively lower bidder than the second bidder could have paid because of the way they constructed the escalators. So that the first was in actuality not the lowest, and that creates this unique special market condition that you cannot get a low responsive bidder on a fixed bid with knowing what your end price would be. So that's why this is a special market condition. The ability to go negotiate that, compare it, negotiate some caps and the rest is going to drive, we think, the lowest price and be consistent with the statute.
Say, Brian.
Sure.
How critical time-wise do we need this?
We're still okay. We're still okay, but we have to go right back out and start the negotiation immediately. But we're still within the timeline needed to get the transformers in place as part of the refinery project.
So are you thinking 3.2, 3.5 is going to be the final cost?
At this point, I'm not going to say, Commissioner.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to negotiate hard, and if there is some kind of escalator language, we're going to try to keep that cap as low, in terms of escalation, as low as possible.
At this point, we're not mining for copper, though.
The other thing is,
and that's kind of a good observation, in a sense, is that the markets are starting to, some of these supply chain markets you can see starting to stabilize in pricing. Lumber is down tremendously in the last 2 to 3 weeks. I think it was 5% overnight. So your some of these supply chain issues are, you can see normalizing in the horizon, but may not be sufficient to have certainty when the time frame needed for the refinery project to go through a whole new bidding process. And you still don't know if it will stabilize in that time frame. So why you need to go out and negotiate the market, and then the suppliers can judge the futures market on materials for how it's affecting their costs.
It was interesting. I have an acquaintance that is in the lumber business, but at the timber end. So he buys timber, usually government sales in areas where maybe there was a fire, and then he cuts it and hauls it to the lumber companies to make usable lumber out of. But he says his prices haven't changed a bit. He doesn't get any more for his timber than he originally did. It's all the middle, the brokers playing the market that are making the profit.
So Brian, I'm sorry, did I cut somebody out?
No, please go ahead.
So Brian, if we go ahead and support resolution 793, we're kind of giving you an open checkbook to figure this out. So if your supplier says, I can give you what you want at 3.2 million, but you got to tell me now, what are you going to do? What are you and Steve going to do?
It still has to come back to the commission for approval.
Yeah, we can't. We can negotiate. We can't say yes.
But it could come down to, you got to give me your answer, because as it was shared with the lumber, yes, I've walked in, looked at them, made a list of lumber I wanted, and I came back and I wound up spending a lot more money, and I already had the prices, and they said, sorry, it went up. So this could change overnight on you, Brian.
No, but all we can do is negotiate the price and then bring it back to the commission for approval or rejection. So
my question to you is, can't we make this resolution authorizing Steve, you to go ahead and purchase this?
You're muted, Steve.
I don't think that'd be appropriate, Commissioner. I think that we need to, follow all of our purchasing guidelines as we've established, and I mean, I think we need to negotiate the best deal we can, but at the same time, we have to recognize, the engineer's estimate and how we follow our purchasing guidelines and your approval. So I agree with, in terms of timing, I don't think that the immediacy, is in front of us that we need to give, that you'd give us authority to purchase. And I don't think it'd be appropriate to make sure that we do follow our purchasing guidelines.
And I support that, Steve. I really do. I just know that when you're put into a corner like this, that sometimes the decision needs to be made now. But I prefer to follow the procedure we have. You come back as long as the provider will say, yeah, I can wait 3 or 4 weeks for your answer, but I don't know if they can.
Commissioner Grant.
I mean, one option too to keep in mind is, because if something comes together June 23rd, and then it means you have to wait almost 2 weeks for the next commission meeting, we could also just entertain the idea of a 10-minute special meeting where it's the only thing on the agenda, we approve it and we adjourn.
Right. Correct.
I have a comment, and that's one of the things that happens when you switch to a bid process to this process that you're undertaking, is that your reliance on your engineering vendor is going to potentially go up. And I just wanted to ask, is there sufficient flexibility with your contracts and agreements with BKI to provide the extra support you're going to need in the direct negotiation? And I just wanted to confirm that.
Yes, we have the ability to utilize BKI under on-call services if we have to. So
great, that's good to know. And just for the purpose of the public, I assume that in the approval for the the revised plan was directly negotiated on transfer of equipment. You will probably want to provide a little bit more technical detail than you normally would in explaining the process you went through. And the reason I'm saying that is because if you're just relying on a vendor, vendors holding accountability for that, and when you do it yourself, it's a little bit you can't just blame the vendor. So I just want to ask about that too, about information and liability and exposure, about doing it, in more of an in-house process for purchasing equipment.
In this case, Commissioner, and I see Alex got his hand raised too, but we're going to rely heavily on our engineering consultant to make sure that whoever we're negotiating with, they meet all the specifications that were in that original bid document, and not shortcut it just to give us a price. So there'll be a heavy use of BKI in this case to make sure we're getting what we're paying for. And the other thing, just quickly on timeline, the one nice thing in this regard is we don't have to do the public advertising and go through those time periods that we do under a normal competitive bid process. So we can shorten the process dramatically.
and we always along with BKI, of course, as we have in the last couple of weeks, and under other contracts, we rely upon John and others at John's office to make sure that we've got all the T's crossed and the I's dotted.
So John, you'll be looking at the trying to minimize any additional risk associated with this particular contracting pathway.
We will.
And I will probably ask about that when we go to approval at the hopefully at the next commission meeting. So
Certainly, this is our procurement lawyer is Richard Davis is who will be involved with that. He helped Brian through some of this. So if necessary, I'll alert Richard so he can be on the phone. I know enough about it, but as we get into the weeds, the nuance, little finer details, I'll bring Richard in.
The other part of this that this kind of process that we haven't spoken to before, but we want to make sure that we don't have any audit questions.
That's, yeah.
Kind of process. So that's why we need to have Richard and John fully engaged on this.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank the whole team. This is a real team effort, and obviously has some challenges and adversaries. I applaud you guys for working together to come up with a new path forward.
We hope the markets settle down, and hopefully this doesn't have this isn't a lesson learned that's going to slop over onto the purchase of fiber optic cable as well.
Hey, don't say that. Okay, yeah. It's certainly, I've heard things like that.
So then, I think we're still waiting for a motion to pass a resolution.
Yes,
That's
sorry.
correct.
I'll make a
Thanks for the
motion.
reminder, Alec.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 793 to waive competitive bid requirements for the purchase of transformers for refinery substation.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alec.
Thank you.
So that's the all of new business. Moving on to the general manager's report, Steve.
I have a couple items, commissioners. One, the second one, I'll actually turn over to John, talk about opening public meetings. But the first one is, annually prior to our friend, the pandemic showing up this last year, we always have had for several years an employee recognition opportunity. We call it our annual banquet, but during those special events, we've recognized employee service, time and service to the PUD. Of course, this last year we were not able to do that. And so today what I'd like to do is just talk about two individuals that we would have recognized back in December or November, whenever we would have had that get together. And the first one, I'll take these by years in service. The senior, both of these individuals completed 10 years of service in 2020, but the employee that came on first was Mike McComber, and Mike was actually hired in March of 2010, and of course he serves as one of our IT technicians. He was hired actually to support Paul in SCADA work, but Paul quickly recognized Mike's what I would say higher than average capacity to work on more staffing support in terms of our IT on a daily basis. And again, Mike started in March of 2010. And as you've seen over the last few months, Mike is the leader on our team in terms of trying to keep all other staff, including commissioners, free of scams and free of viruses and so forth. And Mike is just another example of, we hired Mike to do some, take one role, but has quickly adapted and broadened his support for other areas with us. And so what we do is we provide these beautiful plexiglass awards And I'll just read it to you. It just presented to Mike McComber, 10 years in recognition of your outstanding service and dedication to the PUD. And it has engraved signatures from all three of our commissioners. So with that, Mike,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. And Mike will also get a very small gift certificate. And I say small, considering how we started out with these several years ago, and we haven't recognized inflation on those. So couple of cups of coffee at Woods or Starbucks probably. But anyway, thank you, Mike.
My
The other
reward-
was,
my reward's been working with everybody here. It's been such a great pleasure. And I just, you know, in the years of my employed career, this is the best place that I've ever had the experience of being a part of a team. So thank you all very much.
all right. The second individual is John Littlefield. And I know John's on as an attendee. I don't know, can you let John in? There we go. That's not a selfie of John. But I think it is a good representation of what John has done for us in terms of, and I'll say that's the first time I saw that picture, but really John has come to us from work at Alcoa, and you know, he brings his not only his experience and his knowledge, but his deep understanding of how systems work. John again started with us in July of 2010. And I think that one of Ann's comments was that, you know, John's really been at the electric controls for us for, you know, these last 10 plus years. So John, I don't know if you want to say anything.
I might add that John lives communications wise in an underserved area.
Yeah, I think he's John.
I heard him very faintly, yes.
Yeah, I don't know, John, we heard you just like Commissioner Swanee said, very faintly. If you'd like to make some comments, I'd appreciate it. And if you would like to, you need to speak up or raise your volume on your computer. No, we're not hearing you, John. Well, again, same thing as we indicated with Mike. John, we appreciate all your years of service. I know that you've really brought, along with Ian and Tony, you know, this real concept of what can we do to make, you know, Team PUD work well. There you go. There you go. Just another example, like I said, there are starting to say of, you know, working together, working collaboratively, whatever we need to get done. John is one of those guys that just says, okay, what do we need to do? How do we need to work, you know, make it work for all of us? And appreciate that kind of an attitude and the experience and the knowledge that John has brought to us.
Is that any better?
It's a little better, yes.
Like Brian mentioned, in Custer, so I'm Bay Lynn Road between I should say I've been to this meeting twice because of the internet. Hotspot. Yeah, so I'm served. Appreciate everything that me and my family for the last, 10 years, and I thank them every day. They got me out of Alcoa and into a more stable and safe job. So thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. All right. All right, that's all I had. And John Sitkin, you want to pick up the discussion on the open meeting? You started that earlier, but want to expand on that at this point?
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, certainly. So I don't have much more to add. I circulated last night a draft policy. I don't expect everyone to have digested it all, but it's really will come back in the next commission meeting. Hopefully we'll know more on the governor's orders and what our vaccination rates are by then and what the next step is. But again, as we go through this, we're targeting a June 30th reopening date from the current roadmap to recovery. You can have an in-person meeting, but you have to provide space for non-vaccinated people to socially distance. They'll still be required to wear masks. You'll still have to be required to provide virtual or remote access, and you'll have to provide overflow space for non-vaccinated and vaccinated people to be in. So that will be some management of space questions that, if you want to provide that, staff will have to start working on that. But the intention is to bring this policy back at the next meeting and then be adaptive. You'll see that in the policy, we give the general manager authority to modify the policy as matters proceed so that it can be more adaptive. But we sent that to you last night. I'd encourage you to look at it, and we'll have on your agenda on the 22nd for final approval with maybe any modifications as we learn more.
Thank you, John.
And we'll start
Anything
looking.
else, Steve, you wanted to add? Or?
We'll start looking for an enclosed tent and with Wi-Fi access and heating. So
there you go. One note, I would just tell you that Jim Darling, I sent Jim Darling an email during the meeting just to confirm the 6th at 9 a.m. and he did. He'll be plan on being by Zoom. That'll be by Zoom though.
Anything further, Steve?
I don't have anything further, commissioners.
Great. Then let's move on to commissioner comments. Commissioner Murphy. You're muted.
I'm still getting a lot of conversations from families and about the broadband. So I'm happy, that we're moving on it and continue to move on it. I'm happy nothing's sitting on a shelf. So I appreciate I don't know if you've been patient with me or just put up with me, maybe, I don't know, but thanks for letting me speak and do it, get off my shoulders about what the community, I believe, wants. And so I'm happy to always report back to the people that we are moving forward on the broadband. I've been talking to a lot of farmers too, and I'm surprised how many farmers broadband's become an issue with them too. They're very interested in broadband. So it just seems that everywhere I go, somebody, people from working from home to businesses to schools. So I do believe we're on the right track. So I appreciate that. The only other thing I would bring you up on is Energy Northwest is moving on, and by July we'll finish their refueling. They did go out for a bond for $334.9 million. They will use about 100 million of it. The rest of it's going to go to BPA to help them on some of their debt, and that would have to learn more about that. You have to talk to it'd be an executive committee, but they may talk more about that in July meeting. An interim CEO has been picked, but they will announce that person in July. They had 47 people apply for the CEO of Energy Northwest position. Brad's position. They screened it down to 9, and they're starting the process there. And they are hoping by, well, I said July the 14th, they will start interviewing these people. But by the end of July, the interim will be taken over. So I'm not sure exactly when we'll be seeing a new CEO of Energy Northwest. And I'll stop there. Other stuff, but I see it's almost 11. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mike. Commissioner Grant?
I brought up several things during our broadband discussion, but I did the economic development investment meeting last week. And we there were 3 proposals that the group reviewed. And the one that relates to what we're doing the most was the port's proposal for funding. And we recommended $2 million in grant funds. And so that needs to be approved by the county council. But that will go a long way for helping with the CURB funding match requirements. And I would say that in that discussion, it underscored for me the need to do the work that we talked about with Debbie to really solidify roles. So there were questions about the PUD's role, and so really glad that we're moving forward in that direction. I'd say, you know, again, just this public officials fiber broadband association group that I'm doing has been really useful. And so I can kind of keep talking with George Kahn and thinking about what we might want to put in a potential letter related to the American Rescue Plan, or just communication with our delegation in general about what we're trying to achieve and what federal rule changes might benefit us. And in that discussion, you know, one of the things they said is we need to make sure we're giving our supporters ammunition, which is that there's lots of members of Congress that support more public involvement in broadband. And we need to make sure that we are communicating with them so that they understand what we're trying to do, so that when they're in conversations, they can say, well, but I've heard from public utilities, and you know, this is so that was important for me, learning for me. And I can be the one that kind of tries to keep moving that forward, and appreciated how supportive George Kahn was of the way that association can help us. And I think the last thing that's worth bringing up is I'm continuing to try to do some reading just about executive searches and hiring, and to prepare for the process. And I think one thing that comes up again and again for me is, you know, you can hire the fanciest recruitment firm possible, but relationships are so important. And really, you know, anytime you're having an interaction with someone, you know, whether it's through these other committees we're a part of, your Energy Northwest work, Mike, just sort of mentioning that we're doing a general manager search, and, you know, do you know anyone that might be interested in this? Or you know, I'm kind of trying to keep a running list of people that I might want to reach out to with the general manager job description once we have it done in the fall. So again, I just think that that's where a personal email or phone call from a commissioner letting someone know, hey, I think you could be a really good fit for this. Like we talked about with the supply chain hiring, it's going to be a sales job for us too. I mean, we're going to have to vet people really carefully, but we're also going to have to woo candidates. So I just wanted to kind of plant that seed and let you all know that I'm kind of trying to keep a list of folks that I'll be trying to reach out to later. And I'm happy to share the titles of the books that I'm going through, but I'm going to share some things too with Jim Darling, and look forward to hearing more from Prothman about the process that they use. So that's kind of it from me. I will also be going to the Q2 Phillips 66 meeting on Thursday at the casino. So just to be the PUD representative there. So that's it for me.
Thank you for that update. Yeah, so now I think I was wondering about the PC6 event, so I will attend via Zoom then probably and just monitor it to see what they have to say. It's good to meet. It will be good to meet the new refinery manager. As far as me, I attended the PPC meeting. They're still working through the implications of the Northwest Power Conservation Council studies and reports that I already talked about in a previous meeting. And the other event that I attended was the Clean and Affordable Energy Conference. And I was struck by the amount of content focused on social equity as it relates to utility services. It certainly was a big theme in Olympia, and it's becoming a real central piece of what utilities are focused on. Being a utility, it doesn't directly serve a lot of individual people. It doesn't impact us directly, but indirectly, it's important to be aware that this is a trend that's happening in our industry for both PUDs and investor-owned utilities. It's a big focus. And that's my report. I talked about the broadband advisory group and broadband issues when we talked about broadband. In the next few days, I'll be attending the next round of WID meetings from the Watershed Improvement District meetings. So that's my report. Any further comments under commissioner reports? Okay, let's move on to public comment.
No hands raised at this time.
Okay. And then unless is there any other items for the good of the order? Great. Well, thank you all for attending this June 8th Whatcom County PUD meeting. And I'll call the meeting to close. We're adjourned. Thank you.